of the Suncoast Transportation Planning Alliance and the Central Florida MPO Alliance. As we know, the Suncoast Transportation Planning Alliance is the 8 counties area in the Tampa Bay, and the Central Florida MPO Alliance is basically the 8 counties of the Orlando region. This is my first joint meeting. I started working for Polk TPO around 5 months back, came here from Central Virginia, so I look forward to working with you all. We have great agendas, great speakers, and I'm sure you will enjoy this afternoon session. Today in the morning, we had a board meeting of Suncoast Transportation Planning Alliance, and there was also a lot of engaging conversation, and I'm sure we will follow the things in the afternoon also. Before I start, I see there are many elected officials here today with us, so I will request them to stand so that we can basically really appreciate all the service which they have done there for their communities. So I do know that we have a full agenda and many speakers, so without further delay, I will ask the co-chairs, Commissioner Roy Tyler and Commissioner Stone, to start the meeting. Commissioner Roy Tyler is the chair of Suncoast Transportation Planning Alliance, and Commissioner Stone is the chair of the Central Florida MPO Alliance. So for this joint meeting, they will serve as the co-chair. Commissioner Roy Tyler can start the meeting, and maybe there will be a transition in the middle, and Commissioner Stone can end the meeting. Thank you.
Thank you, Ross. For those associates of mine from the MPO, and again, welcoming back everybody else, my TPO, I think my grandma would say, welcome to my house. I hope things go well while you're here. My police chief is close at hand, so if you have need in that area, don't hesitate to reach out. It is, again, I am privileged to have the opportunity to try and help our region, our residents move to the next step. And nobody recognizes the challenges more than the people in this room. I'm probably going to ask Michelle, who thankfully relieved me of the duties of MPO chair a couple months back, to take over the second part. I had an eye injury that whatever they put in my eye is starting to, so I'll be blinking a lot before somebody thinks that I'm on something else. I'm going to let her handle the rest of that, and I'll hopefully muddle through the first part of this. Rather than do a quorum call, I'm going to ask that we do the old round robin, tell us who you are. Let's start there.
For the record, when you are speaking, remember to push the blue button on the microphones and put your face about 6 to 8 inches from the pillow.
Yeah, Greg Scott, Polk TPO. I'm just manning the computer.
CLC Fine, Florida's Turnpike Enterprise.
Vice Chair for Volusia County, Board
City of DeLand, Commissioner Chris Cloudman with the River to Sea TPO.
Mike Woods, Lake Sumter MPO.
Gary Hutman, Metropolitan Orlando.
Irene Bethea, Chair of the Marion County TPO.
Rob Almas, Ocala Marion County TPO.
Excuse me, everyone. I'm trying very hard to make check marks on a little piece of paper to record that you were here, and I've lost track after Mr. Fine, ma'am. And if you could start with your place you're from and then your name, that'll help, because that's how this form is organized.
River to Sea TPO. Okay. Vice Chair for Volusia County, Barb Gertman.
Thank you.
River to Sea TPO, and Commissioner from the City of DeLand, Chris Cloudman.
Thank you. Mike Woods, yes.
Lake Sumter MPO Director Michael Woods.
Metropolitan Orlando, Executive Director Gary Hutman.
Thank you.
Ocala, Marion County TPO, and City Councilman, Chair of TPO, Ira Bethea.
Thank you.
Ocala, Marion County TPO, Rob Almus, Director.
Space Coast TPO, Yvonne Minus, Vice Chair.
Thank you.
Space Coast TPO, Andrea Young, Chair.
Joe Robinson, Council Member, Space Coast TPO.
Space Coast TPO, Georgiana Gillette, Director.
Michelle Stone, Marion County Commission, and Marion County TPO, as well as the Central Florida MPO Alliance Chair.
Now that you all understand what those directions are, because I usually have to have adult supervision when I'm out in public, so that's why do it by the Roy. Roy Tower, currently serving as chair of the Polk TPO, recent chair of the MPO, and oh yeah, I'm a city commissioner in the wonderful town that you're currently seated in.
Got it. Lake Alfred City Commission, Central Florida MPO Alliance, new here. Polk County TPO, Nancy Daly.
Polk TPO, Parag Agrawal, Executive Director.
Sarasota Manatee MPO, David Hutchinson, Director.
Thanks, Dave. Excuse me 1 second. Is Commissioner Jeremy Clark in the room? Okay, thank you.
I need the adult supervision. No, I'm kidding. Sarasota Manatee MPO Chair and a Commissioner in Manatee County, Vanessa Baugh.
Hillsborough TPO, Gina Torres, Assistant Director.
Hi, I'm Harry Cohen, Hillsborough County Board of County Commissioners and Chair of the Hillsborough TPO. And I just want to say it's been really nice to visit this facility today. It's been real nice to spend the day here.
Tampa Bay Area Regional Transit Authority, Brian Passaro, Principal Planner.
Hillsborough Area Transportation Authority, Bobby Edwards.
Julia Davis, Polk Transportation Planning Organization, Clerk of the Day. Thank you.
You got recruited, right? Hillsborough County TPO and the Suncoast Planning Alliance TMA Committee Chair, Kimberly Overman, and the Chair of the Board of County Commission, Hillsborough County.
Tampa Bay Regional Planning Council, Randy DeShazo, Chief of Staff.
Forward Pinellas, Executive Director Whit Blanton.
Julie Ward Bajolski, board member of the Forward Pinellas and Pinellas County, and member of the TMA and mayor of the great city of Dunedin.
Florida Department of Transportation, District 7, David Gwynn, I'm the district secretary.
I have to sit up much taller because Carl's a lot taller than I am, thank you. Hernando Citrus MPO, Bob Esposito.
Pasco MPO, Carl McKiska.
Pasco County, Christina Fitzpatrick, County Commissioner and MPO.
Thank each of you, because I'm aware of what traveling is like these days. I'm thinking what we should do is appoint a group that pays some attention to some of these transportation issues. But here we are. My DNA is spread all over the eastern side of this alliance. Born in Volusia, the region Halifax, now Regional Medical Center, is famous because I was born there. I know you might think there was some other reason, but that's it. Brevard County, lived there in Cocoa when it was the largest city in Brevard County. Now that I've told you all how old I am, let's see if we can move next. Do we have any members participating via technology? None? Okay. We next need to approve some minutes. I don't know if they were provided to you electronically or not, but the heading says acknowledgement of meeting minutes. That may be what we have to do. Is acknowledge that there are minutes somewhere. Yeah, okay. I think they may be in the packet that you have, so that's where they are.
I'll make a motion to acknowledge that they are in our package.
We have a motion. Do we have a second?
And for the record, remember to say your name, because we can't read your name tags and we can't hear you.
Ocala, Marion County TPO Commissioner Michelle Stone made the motion. The minutes are in your packet, by the way, so I'm looking for a second.
Yvonne minus Space Coast TPO second.
All in favor? Aye. Opposition? So moved. The next item we come to is public comments. There's an allocated space of 3 minutes per speaker. If there's someone here from the public to address something that is not on this agenda, we would please entertain your concerns now. If you'd come to the podium and give us your name and address for the records, we can entertain that concern now. Seeing none, I've preemptively handled item number 4, i.e. the introduction of CFMPOA and SCTPA members. That's something we're going to leave to Ms. Whittington to clean up whatever I messed up.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman, Madam Chair, and members. I am Virginia Whittington. I'm the Director of Regional Partnerships for Metropolitan Orlando. This item is actually meant to provide just a little bit of overview and background for those who may not be familiar with the Central Florida MPO Alliance, and we'll get an introduction to the newly named Suncoast Transportation Planning Alliance. So for this, if you'll go to the next slide, please. Just want to give you an overview of the Alliance. We'll talk about our partners briefly, the structure that we operate under, and then just a list of some of the projects and products that the Alliance is responsible for. Next slide. The Central Florida MPO Alliance is comprised of the 6 metropolitan planning organizations, transportation planning organizations that are on the screen. And the history actually goes back about 25 years. So I'm just going to go through a little bit of the evolution. You've already met the executive directors of many of the MPOs that are on the screen. And so now I just want to share with you how we came to be. How did the Central Florida MPO Alliance come to be? Again, it goes back to 1997 as a result of a problem. And there was a problem that existed that was not exclusive to one community, but there was mutual interest in that Orlando, Orange County, Seminole County experienced the same problem as Volusia County was experiencing. There was this nightmare of a congestion choke point when commuters were coming into Orlando to work and when they were leaving Orlando to commute back home. The St. John's Bridge, or the St. John's River Bridge was the culprit. And it was planned, it was programmed, but it was about 12 years out. But the problem was being exacerbated by the number of people who were moving to Central Florida, the number of employment opportunities that were in Central Florida, and just it was a product of our own prosperity. And so Metroplan Orlando, then Executive Director Harry Barley, reached out to the Volusia County MPO, and they formed what was called the Orlando-Volusia Alliance. And as a result of that coalition and them coming together around a mutual problem, that project was advanced 6 years ahead of schedule. And I think someone came up when they said a light bulb went off. Aha! If we could get together and the two of us could advance a project that quickly, then what would happen if we continue to evolve and this coalition were to get bigger? Well, Brevard joined in May of 1999, followed by Lake County. At the time was just Lake County in 2000. That resulted as the Lake County MPO was established as a result of the 2000 census. And then after that, that's where the MPO Alliance, the Central Florida MPO Alliance, officially got its name in 2021. And then since then, we have had Polk to join us in 2003 and Ocala Marion in 2004. Next slide, please. So some key factors to the continuous evolution of the Alliance have been that we understand the market realities. As we were having lunch just a moment ago, I heard out of the, on one side of me, someone say, and I think it was Mark Reichert, said that we are growing into this mega region. And so we understand that in order for us to grow and that as we're growing into this mega region, that issues that arise are going to be we'll have mutual interest in those. And so as we continue to work and grow, we have had enthusiastic board members who have continued to think regionally and to act regionally. We've had the benefit of having active participation from the Department of Transportation, not only Districts 1 and District 5, but Central Office has been an integral partner, as has the Florida Turnpike Enterprise. Our staff has remained strong in terms of our relationships. We really do like each other. And so when we come together, we are looking for those opportunities where we can have and experience success. And so we decided that we were going to capitalize on that early success and extend regional goodwill to continue working together to solve our regional transportation issues. Next slide. So the structure of the Central Florida MPO Alliance is that we have 18 members. I'm sorry, that it is, and these are the kind of the rules of engagement that are included in our agreement, that it's a forum for exchange of information. We identify those opportunities and we pursue them together. Next slide. So the structure is that we have 18 voting members, 3 from each of the 6 MPOs. Commissioner Michelle Stone is our current chair. We have 3 voting members from each of those. Those officers rotate on an annual basis, and the staff directors are actively engaged. I have the privilege of serving as the staff liaison for the Alliance. And all of the administrative support is primarily handled in Metropolitan Orlando, as we are centrally located. Some of the products and projects are listed here. We were the catalyst for what many of you may recall of the How Shall We Grow effort. Sunrail is some of the conversations that we have, and one that you're going to hear about in a little bit is an update on the Florida Coast to Coast Trail. That idea actually started right here with this group, with the bringing together of the West Central Florida Chairs Coordinating Committee and the Central Florida MPO Alliance. We were able to work together. We were able to go and lobby then Senator Andrew Gardner, who identified $50 million in funding that would be available for us to close the gaps in the trails from coast to coast. We've undertaken a regional transit study and a regional TSMO, Transportation Systems Management and Operations, and the list goes on. And what is the picture of true regionalism? It is found right here in this room. My last slide gives us a picture of when we all come together and we all get to experience what true regionalism is about, because as we are continuing to grow, this body will take a look at those items that interest both east and west coasts of Florida as we advance transportation in Central Florida. So thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Ms. Whittington. Now I have a treat for all of you, so you'll need to listen attentively. It's my understanding that Secretary Gwynn in District 7 We got Whit, has got to throw his 10 cents in there? Okay. Come on along, we're waiting on you. I guess that money you gave me to skip over you, I'm gonna have to give you back, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, good afternoon. My name is Whit Blanton. I'm the Executive Director of Forward Pinellas. And I just want to spend a minute introducing the Suncoast Transportation Planning Alliance. As Virginia mentioned, we've had a name change recently. We were for 30 years the West Central Florida Chairs Coordinating Committee. That doesn't say much about what we do. A bunch of chairs coordinating, I guess. But we liked Suncoast Transportation Planning Alliance because we are an alliance advancing and advocating for transportation improvement throughout our 8-county region. Next slide, please. So this past year, we've undergone a major rebranding of that effort. We developed a website, we developed a logo, and we developed a number of other work products on social media that help reinforce that we're all in this together when it comes to transportation solutions, and it's not a county-by-county solution or strategy to find solutions. It needs to be regional in scope. Our website, our social media have been growing in power and strength, and we're getting that information out there. There's a lot of interest in our region on regional solutions. Our region stretches from Citrus County on the north to Sarasota County on the south, and from Pinellas on the west to Polk on the east. And Polk County gets the best of both worlds, I guess, as the hub here. We have monthly staff director meetings. We have quarterly meetings of our subcommittee, which is the transportation management area, which is Pasco, Pinellas, and Hillsborough as sort of the core of our SCTPA. And then our Suncoast Transportation Planning Alliance board meets twice a year, typically around this time of year and then in December, typically. We have a communications group that meets regularly to collaborate on shared communication strategies and messaging. And probably our most significant achievement in recent years was advocating together for the $1.2 billion interchange at the West Shore area of Tampa, which, while it's in Hillsborough County, influences travel throughout our region because it's where the Tampa International Airport is, and it really is the gateway to the beaches in Pinellas County. Next slide, please. So you can find our information on suncoasttpa.org, and everything that Virginia so excellently articulated about what the Central Florida MPO Alliance is doing and is up to is very similar to the work we perform here. We are about to begin this summer on a regional transit needs assessment for our area and a regional long-range transportation plan that will drive the individual MPO long-range transportation plans in each county. And I think it's important that we think about that top-down framework and then build in the plans from the grassroots level in each county. So thank you very much, Mr. Chairman, for your time, and look forward to a successful meeting today.
Thank you, Whit. Again, at this point, all of you need to rejoice, actually, because I understand that the district secretary from 7 District Gwen says they have an enormous amount of residual funds remaining from their allocations of the previous fiscal year, and he's here to share the wealth.
Well, first of all, I know you had invited Secretary Perdue to be here today. Unfortunately, about 8 other organizations did as well, so you got a consolation prize, so you get David Gwynn, the District 7 Secretary. But I would like to say that it's a great, it's a pleasure for me to be here. And I'll tell you, I've been in Florida doing transportation work for almost 40 years, almost 25 in the Orlando area, worked for almost all of the MPOs over there as a business owner and a consultant, served on the CAC and Metroplan for a number of years and really enjoyed that. And over the last close to 15 years, been in the Tampa area, and I had the pleasure to work for District 1 for a while and got to work with the MPOs and TPOs in District 1, and currently in District 7 with our 4 MPOs, have worked very closely with them. And I can tell you it's very different than it was 35 years ago in terms of regional cooperation and coordination and how to get things done on a regional scale. So it's great to see you all here today. Secretary Perdue gave me some talking points that I want to go over with you. He's new in the position. It's been, I think, almost a month. He's still going around the whole state trying to get to meet people. I know eventually he's going to get here. but he wanted me to share some of his philosophy and how he's going to be looking to move forward with the department and with our partners. He's having us refocus on our core values. He's having us look at our agency focus. And our mission and values are pretty straightforward. Let's see if I can get the slide up here. You see there the words trust, loyalty, commitment, respect. Those are the things that he wants us to refocus on. We want to be one DOT. We have many districts, and we have a central office, and we all have things that we focus on individually, but we're all one DOT, and we all need to work together. There are many priorities that span district boundaries. There are many times when we have to work with partners that aren't even in our district to make sure that we can get things done for our region. And that's the one thing that we need to remember to focus on. We always want to do what's right. That's integrity. Respect, we want to respect diversity, talent, ideas. We want to be open to new ideas that maybe in the past we haven't always been open to. We want to follow through on our commitments. If we say we're going to do something, we want to remember that our commitment is to follow through on that and to do what we said we're going to do. We want to develop trust. We want to maintain trust. We want to make sure that we trust one another, that when we commit to something and when we agree to do something, that that's something that we can walk away from feeling like that's something we're going to get done. And then also being customer driven. And everybody's our customer. Everybody in this room is our customer. Every citizen of Florida is our customer. Every business in Florida is our customer. We need to remember that and be customer driven. We also want to make sure we focus on working together as a team. And as a team is all of us. We don't get anything done individually anywhere near what we can get together and accomplish as a team. So we want to remember that and keep that in our forefront. And then we also remember relationships are the key to our business. We have to develop, maintain, and grow those relationships. And so he's going to be very focused on himself building those relationships and also making sure that the department as an agency continues to do that. So he is very also focused on community engagement. Sometimes it's tricky to try and balance regional needs with community desires. Many times when you do a regional need, it impacts a community more than it may another community. And we always have to remember that we have to do our best to balance how we can respect the community's desires and have the least amount of impacts that the community may see as negative. At the same time, remembering we have a regional focus and we have to make sure that we keep our roadway network, our regional network up to promote business activity and prosperity throughout the regions. But we also want to reshape how we engage with the community and make sure that it's not something that's done in the front end of a project and then kind of not really followed through the life of a project. That's something we'll focus on, and we'll recommit to making sure that as we go through the various phases of a project, that we don't forget that the community engagement is not just in the planning phase, it's not just in the design phase, it goes through the construction and even post-construction. And as the communities across the state evolve, it's our commitment and our requirement to evolve with them. Communities are not static, nothing's static, they change, and we have to be able to change with them. You've heard this morning there were some talks about things with transit, things with other modes of transportation. There are some parts of our state that you really can't widen roads anymore. And if you did, was it the right thing to do? So we need to be open to looking at things like transit, looking at other modes, and making sure that we don't look at the way we always have done things as the way we're going to do things moving forward. And he truly believes that together we can build a transportation network that achieves regional and community visions to meet the mobility needs of the future. So transportation planning. So transportation serves as the background of our economy. Not only moving people and goods, but also improving quality of life. Many a times, I know coming from Tampa this morning, I didn't have any idea how long it was going to take me on I-4 to get here. I got here about an hour early, right? Well, we want to look at predictability of travel, reliability. We should be able to do better on determining how long it's going to take us to get certain places. And we're going to work on that travel time reliability. And the Florida Transportation Plan is the single overarching plan that guides Florida's transportation future, provides direction to all the organizations in Florida, not just FDOT, that are involved in planning and implementing the state's transportation system. The collaborative effort between Fdot and state, regional, and local transportation partners and stakeholders in the public and private sectors is extremely important. The FTP not only guides our investment decisions, but also informs us about the strategic partnerships that are needed in order to be in place for success. The latest FTP places greater focus on items like technology, resilience, and system reliability. As we continue to develop our transportation network, we must retain the flexibility to address different needs throughout the state and adapt to disruptive mobility innovations. Our 5-year work program, of course, the work program is based on priorities set through a locally driven process with input received from our partners, MPOs, local governments, and that spans many months. It includes projects with state and local funding. So our 5-year work program, we will continue to make sure that is a community-driven process. I wanted to talk about a few projects that were in our region that we just really felt were good projects to highlight. They were partnership projects, projects of regional significance. Some of them are small, some of them are large. I don't know how many of you may have heard or even seen about the Denellen with Lacucci Trail underpass. Has anybody heard or seen that? I know a few people over here have. When you look at it on paper, it's a 1-mile trail. You're thinking, okay, a 1-mile trail. What can a 1-mile trail do, right? Well, this 1-mile paved trail actually connected the Withlacoochee State Trail to the Denellen Trail and opened up a huge array of opportunities for people that wanted to use the trail network that weren't previously available. It was completed this past February. Originally, it was going to be a bridge over the US 41. An idea came up to do a tunnel. And at first, there was some skepticism about a tunnel. There were some concerns about, are people going to feel safe going into a tunnel? Can you really build a tunnel in Florida? Is it going to flood? How will that work? But the community came together and talked about it and decided this was the best alternative. And when we opened this up, you should have seen the crowd that came out for that. There were hundreds of people from 4 different counties, I believe, elected officials, 3 different cities. This was just a regional impact for a 1-mile trail connector. And then we found out that people said, I probably wouldn't have rode my bike over that bridge, but I'll go under the tunnel. And then other people said, I can take my horse under that tunnel. There was equestrian use of the trail. And it's just become such a big, successful project. It also saved us over $1 million in construction costs because we were going to have to move a big Duke Energy line. So there's innovative opportunities on small projects even to make a big regional impact. And we're really proud of that project, and I think the community really came together to help us to deliver an even better project. The next project you heard Whit talk about. So when I came to District 7 5 years ago, and this kind of goes back to what you were saying about the St. Johns River Bridge, and I lived there then, and I remember right after they opened that bridge, Deltona exploded, the development up there, because it really just opened up that whole area for transportation. When I came to District 7, I met with the then State Secretary, and he said, we're taking all your money away for the West Shore Interchange. And I was like, why? We need that project. He said, your region isn't behind it. And I said, oh, no, they are. And they said, well, they're not talking like they are. And at the time, unfortunately, we had a lot of things going on with the old Tampa Bay Express program. But what happened was we weren't speaking as a region. And there were some other regions around the state, one being Orlando, that spoke as a region and were getting some really big projects. And at that time, we went around our region and said, we really need to work together. We may have separate MPOs, but we are one region, and we need to find ways to speak as a region so that we get more attention and we get the opportunity to get big projects that we need. And we went around to all of the different MPOs, the county commissions, the city councils, all throughout the Tampa Bay region. And without exception, every single one, even if it wasn't in their county, it wasn't in their city, said this is our number 1 priority. The West Shore Interchange is our number 1 priority. And we took that up to Tallahassee, and a lot of those people, the business community, they went up there. All of a sudden, we had $1.2 billion to build the West Shore Interchange, which is the biggest and most important project for our region. If you're not familiar with the West Shore Interchange, it basically is at the center of almost all of our major transportation facilities. We have the Courtney Campbell Causeway, the Veterans Expressway, I-275, the Tampa International Airport, the West Shore Business District, which when you combine that with the Gateway District just across the bridge, is the largest business district in the southeastern United States. That connects all of that. This will be changing for our region in many ways. And it was all because the MPOs, the county commissions, the city councils, the business community got together and spoke as one. So we're really proud of that. We are going to be advertising that in the next few months. That project will likely start within the next year, and that will be transformative for the Tampa Bay region. I was going to talk about Sunrunner, but of course Brad's already talked about that. That was a great success. I really enjoyed working with PSTA. Some of the things that you heard earlier I won't repeat, but we were able to work together with them to look at helping to acquire right-of-way, to combine a resurfacing project with that on our road so that we could put in some of the things that they needed to make the bus rapid transit system work. And of course, they were a great partner. They came up with the local money, we came up with the state money, and the federal government came through with their half. It's funny how that works. You get the local money and everything starts to take shape. So I'm really hoping that that is also a good opportunity for us to look at the federal discretionary monies that are going to be available. There is so much out there that we can access, but the local funding, and I know you'll talk about some of that later, the local funding is the one thing that makes everything else start to open up. We've got $70 million right now set aside for the streetcar modernization and extension. The federal government, we're going through the study now, I think is seeing it as a favorable investment opportunity. We get the local money, all that will come right in place. So we're looking forward to more of these types of projects throughout our region. We also built, and I know our friends in District 1 are familiar with the Diverging Diamond down in Sarasota. That's been very successful. We built our first one. It's not complete yet, and we're still getting the final touches put on it. By the summer, it should be open. We're already seeing some benefits with that. It's funny how you think people are going to not know how to drive on the wrong side of the road across an interchange, but they figure it out. It's intuitive, and somehow it moves a ton more traffic. So we're excited about that opening up. And one other item I thought I'd mention, and this really is on the boundary of District 1 and District 7. There's been a big problem we've had, and I think in District 1 there's even been more. You know, there's a lot of trucks out there, and they don't have anywhere to park at night. And they have, you know, they have a 10-hour limit, I believe, on how long they can drive. And I mean, they can't go past that, or else they're in violation of their I guess, their permit. And so many times they just park wherever they can find to park. And sometimes they're in places we would prefer they not park, on the side of a road or in a place where it's really not safe. We have a truck parking facility that we've recently submitted for a federal grant at the intersection of County Line Road and I-4. This area has about 18,000 trucks a day come through that area. And if you've been down that way and you see the number of manufacturing and distribution centers that are popping up down there, that's only going to grow. We have bought a 40-acre site down there that'll have up to close to 400 truck parking spaces that we'll be able to build out there. This area is one of the fastest growing. If you're not familiar with what I've learned recently is, you know, it used to be that a lot of long distance truckers would go on the road for a week and they'd come home maybe a week later or 2 weeks later or whenever. They would go all over the place. Nowadays, the truckers want to be home at night. They want to be with their family. And so what they look for is opportunities to be able to drive 4 hours, drop a load, pick up another one, and come back 4 hours. Well, the Lakeland Plant City area is 4 hours from South Florida, 4 hours from up in North Florida. It's a perfect place to have this type of a place where a trucker can go pick up his load in that area, drop it off in Lake City or Miami or wherever he has to go, pick up another one, come back. So this area is going to grow in that, and we're really happy that this project seems like it's going to be something we can do soon, but we're going to need more of that in the future. So there's lots of great projects. The last couple of things I wanted to talk about was safety. As you know, we have way too many people die on our roads. I think it's about 46,000 last year in the United States died. over 3,500 in our state. In my district, in District 7, we unfortunately have about 10 people die a week. The little bit of good news was my safety folks told me that so far this year, we appear to be 20% less than last year. It's still a lot, though. We are doing a lot to try to change not only the nature of the roadways by redesigning them, putting in new traffic control devices, putting in things for pedestrians and bicyclists, but also to educate people at basically all areas of society, whether they be in our high schools, whether they be older drivers, whether they be in different economic areas. The one thing that still surprises me is that half of the people that die in a car crash, obviously not the pedestrians and bicyclists, if you're in a car crash, half of the people that die aren't wearing their seatbelt. But only 1 out of 20 people isn't wearing their seatbelt. So what that tells you is you're 10 times more likely to die in a car crash if you don't wear a seatbelt. So I try to encourage our people, and I've heard that the group that violates the doesn't wear a seatbelt the most, 18 to 24. I thought it might be older people. I know my father used to say he didn't want to get trapped in a fire in the car, so he wouldn't wear a seatbelt. But I didn't think people my children's age wouldn't, but they do. I don't know why, but we're trying to educate them and get some better compliance in that. But also speeds. Speeds are so high. We're working with law enforcement to try and find ways to make people slow down. We're trying to find ways to redesign our facilities. It's going to take a long time, but we have to educate the public. We have to work with law enforcement, and hopefully we'll be able to make some big strides in this area. One thing we did, sometimes it's not a major investment that you need to make in order to try to make a big change. And one thing that we decided to do in District 7 was we've decided to go ahead and put in leading pedestrian intervals on all of our signals. And if you're not familiar with the leading pedestrian interval, what it does basically is if you're going to get a walk signal, usually it comes on the same time as the green light comes on for the cars. Well, a lot of times that means the car goes and you're stuck on the corner and you don't have a chance to get out into the road because they're already turning. This will give a period of time right after it turns walk signal before the cars get a green light. It does take a little bit of time away from the road green light, but we're already starting to see it's making a difference. People get a chance to start getting into the intersection and cars will stop for them. We're doing that throughout our district. We've already implemented close to 600 of them throughout our district. We're going to do that. We're also doing before and after studies to be able to quantify the benefits. But it's just to show that some things take a lot of money and a lot of time, and some things you can do very quick and inexpensively. So we're going to focus on both sides of that equation and try to make our roads safer. With that, again, Secretary Perdue sends his regards and regrets that he couldn't be here today. But hopefully I've shown to you what his philosophy is on us moving forward. And again, I'd just like to reiterate the department's commitment to working with each and every one of you as we move our regions forward. And I'll be glad to answer any questions you may have.
We're not going to put you in that question and answer position, Secretary, as long as you kind of explain about those residual funds I mentioned prior to you coming up.
They're only for you, and you weren't supposed to tell everybody else.
Okay, all right. Well, we'll talk later.
All right.
We will move this to my esteemed colleague, Commissioner Stone, to kind of keep you rabble-rousers in place from here till the end.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you again, Secretary Gwynn, for being here. And please give our highest regards and congratulations to Secretary Perdue and his new appointment as well. And I certainly want to echo of thanking everyone of being with us this afternoon in this very nice facility. And next on our agenda is Robin Birdsong with the SunTrail and Transportation Alternatives with FDOT. And she's going to be going over our FDOT trails and non-motorized transportation. So we welcome you, Ms. Birdsong.
Thank you for having me. I am Robin Birdsong. I'm with the Fdot out of the central office in Tallahassee. I do oversee two funding programs, the Shared Use Non-Motorized SunTrail program, which is state money, as well as the federally funded Transportation Alternatives set-aside program, commonly referred to as TA. As we all know, and we've heard through ECHO, through many conversations and presentations today, partnerships are key to everybody's success for all of our transportation systems. That's why it's so encouraging to be here, and I'm really thankful that you invited me to talk to you today. As Secretary said, a Florida Transportation Plan. Oops. The Florida Transportation Plan does guide the state's transportation future, and it's for all of us moving forward. It identifies our long-range policy-level goals, objectives, and strategies for all of our transportation systems, including the trail network. Both SunTrail and TA helps achieve the 7 goals of the FTP. But the money. How do we get the money? And for the programs that I oversee, as well as other funding sources within the department, a lot of it's through the grant application process, the GAP online system. Many of you that are with the MPOs may have participated in the most recent GAP training that was provided. Erica invited the MPOs to join back in January. Prior to that, we had other training opportunities, but it's the mechanism from where you apply for many of our funding sources, including both SunTrail and TA, but not limited to those. Sarita for Safe Routes to Schools recently hosted some GAP training and applications for that program as well. This slide does include key links of how to access GAP and some of the help guides associated with it. We also have the working with Fdot and a community resource guide for many of our programs and sources. It provides a higher level overview of the tools that Mark and prior folks in policy planning, another section within our department, put together and they maintain. So these are links so that you can get to those. Earlier, Tina mentioned the balance of rural and urban needs for prioritizations and different funds. And so some of these tools will help identify those different funding sources and accessing them. So the funding sources that I work with, again, are TA and SunTrail. Our adopted work program, the Fdot statewide adopted work program, details and commits our funding sources for the included projects. It documents the construction and production of projects and provides clear direction on where, when, and how we will fund and build projects. By statute, if it's not in the AWP, the Adopted Work Program, we cannot do the project. The roles that many of you at the table, you're well aware of that, but it's important to always remember that. We adopt our work program on July 1, and then through the process, we continue developing through the next 5 years. So again, we'll start with SunTrail. It was established in 2015. Much of the work that some of the partners here did for Coast to Coast, one of the systems within the SunTrail network, is what laid part of the foundation. It ultimately was adopted through the legislative and governor's support and is in statute. It's 339.81. It's reoccurring $25 million allocation for developing the statewide system in compliance with the eligibility criteria and other aspects of the program. If you're not familiar with SunTrail, we do have information in our handbook, on our website, as well as many other tools. Generally, it's a 4,000-mile network that's envisioned to connect key resources throughout the state. The 4,000-mile network is in various phases of development. Parts existing, parts are just connected vision, and parts are programmed for funding through various sources, not just DOT. And much of it well predates the SunTrail program and really even DOT's involvement. Pinellas Trail is a great example. It's one of our state's oldest trails, but it is definitely part of the spine of the statewide network. So the 5-year adopted work program for SunTrail, all of our work programs for the TLWR funding code is on our website. We do balance needs throughout the state. We do focus on the coast to coast as a regional system, as well as the St. Johns River to the Sea Loop. This group does have both of those regional systems, but it is a statewide funding source. And looking at the rest of the state outside of those regional systems is also very important. We heard that when we were really developing the program beginning in 2015 for the first year and a half. We got stakeholder input on how to move forward, and there were a couple different options, and overwhelmingly it was look statewide and try to balance the needs. So it is something that we do. It might fluctuate a little bit where it's not a perfect breakdown every year, but over the period of the 5 years is what we really focus on. Some funding sources do have a limit on how much can be requested. That was overwhelmingly something that stakeholders didn't want for this program. I mean, ultimately, bridges are expensive. Underpasses are expensive, but they are key connections, and that last mile can be a real limitation. As we talked about the Withlacoochee to Denellen Trail, it really did connect so much in terms of resources for that final mile. And it comes back to the vision of the locals, communities, and how they want to move forward for connectivity. This is an example of one of the SunTrail funded projects that is the most recent one that opened in this region. If you want to see more information about the other 24 projects that have fully opened since the funding started, they're all on our website as well. So the other funding source that I work with is transportation alternatives. And that one's a little different. That's not statewide decisions. Those are district decisions. But my role is to maintain that federal compliance and have consistencies throughout the state. And then locally through your districts and your MPOs and your communities, additional criteria, documented criteria, and what's important to your communities can be part of the selection process. As with any of the funding sources, having that focused vision remains consistent and important and can really make a difference. For the Suncoast Planning Alliance, I ran some numbers. We like numbers and show what we're giving, where we're putting monies. So for the Suncoast Planning Alliance, as of February, we had close to $91 million in authorizations for the funding codes that I work with. That's different from the MPO's SU funds. So that's a different process, and that's how we track things throughout our work program. But that's over 22% of the statewide total for the time frame, and so that's really significant. And although the bulk of that funding source in Florida has been used for bicycle and pedestrian improvements, not just trails, might be sidewalks, making better accessible ramps for ADA accessibility needs, includes bike lanes and cycle tracks and other resources. 99% statewide is what Florida has done. The funding source does provide mechanisms for other things, including enhancing the integrating different modes and enhancing and improving cultural, historical, environmental aspects of transportation. So in some places, they've done wayfinding signage, and even within the St. Johns River to the Sea Loop and River to Sea TPO, the coast-to-coast wayfinding signage was funded through the TA program. So there are different mechanisms. It doesn't always have to be a mega bridge project. There are other needs that can be accomplished through these funding sources. So within the Central Florida MPO area, nearly 22% of the statewide total, almost 88 million has been authorized through the TA program. So several folks have mentioned the Coast to Coast Trail, and of course it's always near and dear to all of us. For those that are unfamiliar with the Coast to Coast Trail, C2C, this is the acronym. It's a developing system. It's approximately 250 miles. 90 miles are connected on the western side. About over nearly 120 are connected toward the middle eastern side. We have online tools that show, including this map, that show existing sections, but really the Tampa Bay Regional Planning Council and Central Florida Regional Planning Council host more resources. They host a website that are brought in a lot of the partner tools. We have this map's on our website. It's interactive, and so anytime you see an underlined blue text, you can click on it and learn all kinds of information about the project, the schedule, the timing. You can look at the past decisions, the public information associated with the public meetings and the input that was received, why we're moving forward with certain alignments and the timeframes for doing so. We have a similar product for the St. Johns River to the Sea Loop, both the at-a-glance version and the detailed. Another project that we have underway that helps, we completed a coast-to-coast trail crossing assessment for the western section, the 90 miles connected in District 7, beginning in St. Pete and going to Brooksville. We completed that back in last fall, and we've kicked off the Part 2. This Part 2 will be completed by the end of February next year. There's 500 crossings. And as the trails have been built over time and the crossings are varied, they varied from private driveways to big major roadway crossings. We're trying to look at them, take a collective comprehensive look to see what consistencies could be improved to make it safer for everyone. We'll identify the actions for these improvements, and sometimes they're low cost, might be better vegetation management, trim trees, you might not be able to see as well at the crossings, and then other times they could be a much longer term solution needed, like an overpass or something like that. But the first one and the second one will both identify what these improvements are so that the toolbox is available, that entities can then pursue appropriate funding for making the improvements. But as the Secretary said, engagement through all of your processes, it really is key. Focus on your communities and do it early. Do it early. You know, it's so important, and go to their places. I mean, it's sometimes could be intimidating for somebody that's not involved with government to come to a government facility. Perhaps they speak a different language, and I don't necessarily mean English versus something else, although that could be a factor as well. There's a lot of terms and acronyms and planning, and you know, we talk even the chair's coordinating committee. That term chair to most people doesn't mean the same thing as it might mean to us in this room. and so think about the big picture and involve them. See what they want. There's so many ideas that they'll have. in Florida, our development pressures we have people like Florida. People want to live in Florida, and people are coming to Florida. And 2 years ago, the community north of here where I traveled through on the way here, I know it looked different. There's no doubt in my mind it looked different. It is quite obvious the construction that's happening everywhere and the different development pressures that can be associated with that. So just because you involved a group 5 years ago, it's very important to document their vision and move forward with their vision, but at the same time, remember to bring in your new folks because they might not have been part of the conversation. They might really have helpful ideas to help the community grow together in a way that benefits everybody. I was fortunate to be in St. Pete a few months ago, and so the Sunrunner project is so encouraging. Being able to go from the pier and that destination through Central Avenue and everything that there is to do there to the beaches, it really is quite phenomenal. I ate at a cafe there at one of the restaurants on Central Avenue, and it was constantly somebody parking in a temporary space to run in and get food and then deliver. And we talked to a few folks that work in the area, and they said, we don't have a lot of money, and we are commuting, and we're coming from somewhere else. And so we're constantly moving our cars because it's expensive. We don't make a lot of money, and that's just the reality of how we are and where we work and where we want to be, even in our non-working time. And so having those options for different mobility, because everybody's going somewhere, and they might go to the same place for different reasons on different days. But I'm very trail-centric in my role, bicycle and pedestrian primarily, but looking at the different modes and getting from different places at different times and knowing what motivates people to do that is really forefront in all of our minds, and important to keep focused on that vision and to have a consistent vision. So with that, I am in central office. I do rely heavily on the districts. They're going to be most familiar with many of the projects that I'm involved, but I'm happy to take any questions that you might have for me.
Ms. Birdsong, thank you so much for sharing all that you have with us today and how to really connect the coast-to-coast trailway systems. I mean, this is extremely exciting and certainly going to help with economics across our state as well. For the sake of time and staying on our agenda, though, I will bypass your request for any questions. Everyone has your contact information, and I'll just ask anyone who is in the room who may have any questions or comments or any follow-up to get with you directly.
That would be great.
That way.
Thank you so much.
And thank you so much for being with us. And I do want to thank our committee at the table to stay engaged with our presenters as well. So thank you.
Thank you.
Next up, we also have making the case for alternative transportation revenue sources in Florida, Mr. Mark Reichard, who is the Executive Director of MOPAC. So thank you for being with us today, Mr. Reichard.
Good afternoon, everybody. Parag, thank you very, very much for the opportunity to come to talk to you folks today about something that is currently a concern, but if we don't start planning for it, it will turn into a crisis in a few years down the road. Again, my name is Mark Reichard. I am the Executive Director of the Metropolitan Planning Organization Advisory Council. I think most of you know what we are, but for those that don't, The MPOAC is an organization of organizations. I represent the collective interest of Florida's 27 MPOs and assist the MPOs in carrying out the urbanized area transportation planning process by serving as the principal forum for collective transportation policy discussion. The MPOAC was created by the Florida legislature to augment and not supplant the role of the individual MPOs in the cooperative transportation planning process. So what I hope to do today is to provide you with enough information on how transportation infrastructure is funded in Florida and about the fiscal challenges that we are facing so that you all can become informed advocates to help spread the message that we need to acknowledge that there is a problem relying on the fuel tax as our primary source of transportation revenue. And we need to begin the discussion of replacing it with a more sustainable option. So what I'd like to do first is to spend a little time describing how exactly we fund transportation infrastructure in Florida. It's funded by a combination of federal, state, and local fuel taxes, fees on the annual vehicle registrations, the initial registration, vehicle titles. There's a $2 per day rental car surcharge, and the department receives a share of documentary stamp taxes on real estate transactions. Excuse me. The state's toll facilities are primarily supported by tolls and concession earnings, so the $1.3 billion in toll receipts do not flow through the State Transportation Trust Fund, so they are not reflected on this chart. Taxes on the sale of motor fuel typically account for about 60% of our transportation revenue receipts. This chart is fairly typical of annual receipts. So my question to you all is, how much do we pay in taxes on a gallon of fuel in Florida? Anybody willing to take a chance? Now, don't be embarrassed. I've given this presentation in the past to a room full of transportation experts, and nobody's gotten it right. 23.4 cents? 33? Okay. Well, actually, that's a trick question. Because the answer depends on which county you're in Florida when you purchase your fuel. When we go to the gas station to fill up our tanks, we are paying the same federal, state, and local fuel taxes on each gallon of fuel we pump, regardless of the price of the fuel. But the local fuel taxes fluctuate by county. Federal highway fuel taxes are 18.4 cents per gallon on gasoline and gasohol, and there's an additional 6 cents per gallon on diesel fuel. 2.86 cents of this is transferred into the federal mass transit account, and 1/10 of a cent goes towards the federal LUST fund. Yes, you heard me right, there is a federal LUST fund, but it's not what you think it is. That is the Leaking Underground Storage Tank Trust Fund. And by the way, the federal tax has not been raised since 1993. Had it been indexed to the Consumer Price Index, it would be 33 cents today, generating about an additional $22 billion per year. And through 2021, the Federal Highway Trust Fund has been supplemented by transfers from the general fund to the tune of $270 billion. There are two fuel taxes that compose of what we refer to as the state fuel tax. There's the state highway fuel tax, which is applied to each gallon of motor fuel at 15 cents per gallon. Then there is the State Comprehensive Enhanced Transportation System Tax, much easier to refer by its acronym as SCETS tax, and that's 8.3 cents per gallon. The state and SCETS fuel taxes are the only fuel taxes indexed to inflation. They are adjusted annually on January 1st based on the change in the Consumer Price Index. The 0.125 cent per gallon inspection fee is part of the state gas taxes we pay, but they do not come into the department and to the State Transportation Trust Fund. Those funds go into the General Inspection Trust Fund within the Department of Agriculture and Consumer Services, and it is not indexed to the CPI. Now, there are 3 state-imposed local fuel taxes imposed by the legislature. The constitutional fuel tax went into effect in 1943 and is imposed on all motor fuels at 2 cents per gallon. Then there's the county fuel tax that went into effect in 1941 and is imposed on all motor fuels at 1 cent per gallon. And then there is the municipal fuel tax that became law in 1971 and is imposed on all motor fuels also at a penny per gallon. None of these three fuel taxes flow through the State Transportation Trust Fund, and none of them have ever been increased. There are also three locally imposed local option fuel taxes. There is the 1 to 6 cents county local option fuel tax that's been around since 1985. It's mandatory that all counties levy this tax at the full 6 cents on diesel fuel. There's another county local option fuel tax of 1 to 5 cents per gallon that went into effect in 1993. Diesel fuel is not subject to this tax. And there is the 9th cent fuel tax that's been around since 1972. That's not what you're thinking. This is not that 0.9 cents you see. Why we price fuel like that, I have no idea. The reason it's called the 9th cent fuel tax is because it went into effect when the state fuel tax happened to be 8 cents per gallon at that time. So this was the 9th cent. So, and it's mandatory that all counties levy the tax on diesel fuel. None of these local taxes flow through the State Transportation Trust Fund. And this is just showing the tax rates on diesel fuel. It reflects the additional 6 cents per gallon of the federal fuel taxes on diesel and removes the 5 cents of locally imposed fuel taxes that are not applicable to diesel. And also the 0.125 cent per gallon inspection fee is not assessed on diesel fuel. So of the 12 cents of locally imposed fuel taxes, that's the 1 to 6, 1 to 5, and the 9th cent fuel taxes, only 32 of our 67 counties have implemented the 3 local fuel taxes to their fullest extent. So the maximum tax that can be levied on a gallon of gasoline or gasohol in the state is 57.8 cents per gallon and 58.7 cents on diesel fuel. So in Florida, we have a perception problem. For years, every year the FDOT budget comes out, talk about these record budget levels. And, we are the envy of most states in this country. We had, it was sustained at about $10 to $11 billion each year. That's a lot of money for a state to invest in its transportation system. The budget that was just passed by the governor is a new record, $12.7 billion, and this doesn't even include all the federal taxes that are yet to come down to the state of Florida. So, mostly because of our state commitment to investing in our infrastructure, Florida's transportation system is consistently ranked as one of the best in the country. Only 25% of FDOT's budget comes from the federal government. That is also unique in this country. Some states, Rhode Island in particular, rely almost on 100% on federal funds to finance their transportation system. And it seems like everywhere you go in Florida, there's construction going on. There's road construction everywhere. Our ports are being invested in, and our airports are being invested in, our transit systems are being invested in. So we have a perception problem. We talk about all this money that we have, and we see all this construction going on. People complain about always being held up in these construction zones. So where's the problem? Well, it's not really so much a problem today, even though I think everybody in this room recognizes that we will never have enough money to meet the needs of the state when it comes to transportation. But, Florida is in a much better financial position for its funding infrastructure than almost all the other states in the country. And, why is that? Well, it's because we've been adjusting our state fuel taxes based on the CPI since 1992. This indexing of the state fuel taxes has resulted in approximately $8 billion in additional transportation revenue since the indexing began. We also have the most toll road mileage in the country. We have more toll roads than any other state in this country. We have taken advantage of every innovative finance option available, and we continue to grow. Over 300,000 people are moving to the state of Florida each year, and we consistently have had over 100 million visitors coming to the state each year. That's great. On the one hand, it gives us more drivers, more consumption of gasoline, more fuel tax receipts, but on the other hand, you've got more and more people using our transportation system. So all these variables have produced our record transportation budgets over the years. So what are we facing, though, coming down the road? Our current population is $22.2 million, and it's projected to be $24.4 million in 2030. We have surpassed the number of annual tourists to Florida from our pre-COVID numbers, and we are on track for 133 million visitors this year. This shows the daily vehicle miles traveled in Florida going back to 1991. And, we have the data through 2020, and I'm sure it's going to change for 2021. But we don't have those official numbers just yet, but we do know that it's continuing to increase. But you can see on this, the decrease that happened in vehicle miles traveled during the recession years around 08 and 09. And then, of course, the last dip there was due to COVID. But it's on the rise again. And unlike many other states in the country, fuel consumption and therefore fuel tax receipts have been growing again in Florida. But you can see the drop in consumption during the recession and during the COVID years, but you can also see what the future has in store for us. Now, these numbers are based on the Revenue Estimating Conference. I don't know if you're familiar with the Revenue Estimating Conference, but that is the legislative body that provides the data to our legislature every year that estimates how much revenue the state is going to be producing, everything from general revenue to the funds coming into the State Transportation Trust Fund. You can get a little bit better picture of what's going on by looking at what's occurring in Florida, by looking at the annual rate of change in fuel consumption. Between 1990 and 2005, fuel consumption in Florida increased an average of 3.4% each year. During the height of the recession in fiscal year 08-09, consumption dropped over 5% and dropped again during the COVID years. More recently, the data is showing a positive rate of change in fuel consumption each year, but the rate of growth is forecast to decrease each year. We attribute the increase in fuel consumption to the fact that, again, our population continues to grow, and once again, the number of tourists coming to Florida is at an all-time high. However, the decrease in the growth rate we attribute to the increasing fuel efficiency of the statewide fleet of vehicles and more electric vehicles entering the fleet. Now, and of course, the data that I'm sharing with you today does not take into account the fact that we're probably going to be hitting $5 a gallon in fuel within the next week or two. So let's take a look at what the future has in store for Florida. In 1980, the average fuel efficiency of the fleet of light-duty vehicles in the United States was 14.9 miles per gallon. In 2020, this increased to 22.9 miles per gallon, an increase of 54%. In 1975, the average fuel efficiency of new model year passenger vehicles was 13.1 miles per gallon. By 2020, this increased to 25.5 miles per gallon, an increase of over 48%. Fuel efficiency has increased 32% just since 2005. Now, this reflects just the electric vehicle impacts to the market share. It doesn't take into account the more fuel efficiency of internal combustion engine vehicles. But battery electric vehicles in Florida in 2021 totaled 44,068. It's projected that electric vehicles in Florida will account for 3.6 million of the fleet by 2048. The most aggressive forecast predicts that the electric vehicle share of the new vehicle market will be 35% in 2040. In terms of vehicle fleet penetration, electric vehicles will be 15% of vehicle stock in 2040. Now, again, all this information is based on prior studies. It does not take into effect what we are currently facing. So, and again, note that this is only electric vehicle impacts to revenue, not the impacts of hybrid or improved fuel efficiency of internal combustion engines. And again, the impact of the rising fuel cost of fuel may accelerate the move towards electric vehicles. But the conservative growth rate shows negative 5.6%, revenue loss, and increasing to a negative 20% in the aggressive growth scenario. But it's been estimated that for every 1% increase in the penetration of electric vehicles into the market, there will be a corresponding half percentage reduction in revenue to the State Transportation Trust Fund. So what happens in the business sector when the business model is no longer working? They change their business model, or they go out of business. You know, that's how we really need to talk about what we are facing when we're talking to our legislative leaders and other policymakers in the state. You know, talk about it in business terms. You know, everybody knows that for every dollar invested in the transportation system returns $4 in benefits to the state of Florida. You know, it's a no-brainer. You know, the Florida Department of Transportation is the only arm of state government that actually impacts the state's economy. You know, without a viable transportation system, our economy goes down. So, you know, the MPOAC has recognized this. It has decided that mostly due to, I think we all recognize that Florida is a conservative state, and talking about a change to any tax structure is not something that you really want to have discussions out in the open. Florida DOT, it's an executive branch agency. It cannot be out there talking about funding. And it kind of looks self-serving too, that, hey, we need more money. So the message really needs to come from you folks. It needs to come from the local level up. Perfect for the MPOs to take the lead in that effort. The MPOAC at its July 6th Policy and Technical Committee meeting, the Policy and Technical Committee is made up of most of the staff directors from each of the 27 MPOs. We're going to be getting together to talk about issues, hot topic issues. This is one of those issues that we're going to be talking about. We're also going to be considering possibly going after some of the new grant money in the new federal infrastructure bill that goes to states for conducting pilot projects on looking at mileage-based user fees. I'm happy to take any questions if there's time, Madam Chair. I can tell you, don't ask me for any solutions. I don't have the solution. I'm not here to talk about the mileage-based user fee as the way forward. That's probably the direction that the country is going to go in as a whole, and that it's not something that any single state or certainly any single jurisdiction can do on its own. Those discussions are being had at the national level, and the MPOAC has recently joined the Mileage-Based User Fee Alliance based in Washington, D.C. That's where most of the discussions nationally are being taken. Whether you believe the mileage-based user fees are the way to go or not, we believe that Florida at least needs to have a seat at the table as those discussions go on, which is why we have joined that organization. So that's it for me, Madam Chair, unless there are any questions.
Well, Mr. Reichard, we certainly appreciate the news that you've shared. You're certainly giving us a call to action.
Yes.
And we appreciate the reality of where we are today and what the future holds. The contact information that you've provided, I think, is going to be sufficient for any additional questions that we may have. And again, thank you for being with us today.
Sure.
And for the leadership that you and the group do for all of us.
Thank you. And again, I would like to close with the fact that Florida is in a much, much better position financially than almost every other country, every other state in this country because of the investments that we're doing locally and at the state level.
Thank you again.
Thanks.
Prague, Oana, I'll send this back to you now to take it to our panel discussion.
So again, thank you, Madam Chair. So we have a panel discussion right now. We have 4 panel members, and 5th is the moderator, me. I would request the panel members to join me at the desk over here so that we can have a conversation.
Then you won't know who hit you.
So good afternoon, everyone. Again, I'm Parag Agrawal from Polk TPO, and I will be serving as the moderator of this panel discussion on transportation sales surtax. As we all know, the Florida's population is increasing at an exponential rate, mainly because of our high quality of life and, of course, the weather. We are the sunshine state. In 2021, Florida was home to more than 21 million people, and the population increased by more than 200,000 in just last 1 year. Although this increase in population has many benefits to our economy, but it also has some downsides. And adequate transportation infrastructure and traffic congestion are the two key issues facing our communities today. Today we heard from many speakers about the excellent work that's being done by their agencies to keep our communities moving while keeping us safe. We also heard from Mark talking about the various revenue sources which are available in Florida. One of the local transportation revenue source is the transportation sales surtax. And many communities in Florida are basically supplementing their resources with transportation sales surtax to benefit their county residents. So to talk more on transportation sales surtax, we have a great panel of 4 speakers. 2 speakers are basically the elected officials, and 2 speakers, I will say, are professionals. Today we are joined by Chair Kimberly Overman. She is the chair of Hillsborough County Board of Commissioners. Madam Chair is a 36-year resident of Tampa Bay area, and she was first elected to the Board of Commissioners in 2018. As we know, the Hillsborough County residents will be voting on a transportation sales surtax this year in November. The second speaker we have is Commissioner Stone from Marion County. Commissioner Stone has a strong financial background and has also worked in the banking industry. The Public Safety Transportation Infrastructure Sales Tax referendum was approved by the Marion County residents in 2016 for 4 years, and it was renewed in 2020. The 1% sales tax referendum, it basically funds the public safety needs of law enforcement, fire rescue, EMS, as well as it also helps to maintain the transportation network. So in Marion County, we are basically combining the transportation referendum with our public safety needs. The third speaker which we have today is Mr. Paul Calvaresi from Broward County MPO. Greg Stewart, who's the executive director of Broward County MPO, was not able to join us today, so Paul is stepping in for Greg. As we know, Broward County is one of the largest counties in Florida with a population of more than 2 million and 31 cities. The county residents approved a 30 years 1% sales surtax for transportation in November of 2018, and the surtax took effect on January 1st, 2019. And perhaps the most important speaker we have today is Mr. Robert Peskin. Robert is a senior consulting engineer from AECOM, and he has served AECOM for more than 45 years. Robert has worked with various communities throughout the country, and I know that he is working in Austin, Texas. He has worked in the Chicago area. He has experience of working in the Northeast, and he has also worked in the New England area. And he will be talking to us about some of his experiences, and he will be sharing some of the experiences from throughout the country and what we can do in Florida. Talking about the structure of this panel, basically this panel has 3 segments. First, I will be inviting each of our speakers to basically share their experiences on transportation sales surtax with our audiences. In the second segment, our team has prepared a series of questions for our panel members. And the third segment is maybe we can open this panel discussion for our audience so that audience can ask any questions from our panel members. So with this introduction, I will first invite Chair Kimberly Overman to share her experience with Hillsborough County.
Thank you very much. I thank you all for being here. I will tell you, I did get elected in 2018 and currently serve on the MPO as well as the chair of the Board of County Commission. But prior to getting elected, I spent a lot of time going to TPO meetings. I think actually TPO meetings create politicians or transportation planners, one or the other. Because what's the beauty of having an organization such as this, that's both regional in nature, but also at the local level. You know, we are the sort of the engine that teaches people about what's possible, because we talk about what we'd like to see, and we have meetings that teach people, you know, what they would like to see. The challenge is, as an elected, you have to actually get it funded. And as we heard earlier with, you know, 30% of our transportation dollars dependent on fuel taxes, and we're starting to transfer over to other methods of getting around. And transit is a direct conflict of that, where it doesn't necessarily use as much fuel or uses different types of fuel. There's always been a conflict on how we go about getting our transportation needs met, whether it be more roads, more transit, more trains, more buses, however we've helped people get around. Hillsborough County's been really interesting because we had a big move in 16 with a campaign called Go Hillsborough, the idea of getting people around. And the community, who had been attending a lot of the MPO meetings, hearing about all the things that we needed to invest in, basically rejected the elected's positions of investing more in roads rather than in transit, because the community had heard that in the very rapidly growing Hillsborough County community that needed to have some transit, we have a very small $500,000 that invests our transit agency that is literally anemic in nature in terms of its funding. The community really wanted to see transit and fought back on that issue. The leaders pulled after spending a lot of money building a campaign to get a referendum on the ballot, the leaders chose not to put it on the ballot. In 18, the community decided, well, enough of that. If the electeds won't do it, we'll just do it ourselves. So we had a citizen-led referendum that came to the ballot in 2018 that the formulary for spending was in line with our MPO planning for the most part. So they listened, they heard what we needed to do. It wasn't political, let's just do this. It allocated a 45% towards transit, 1% to the planning organization, and the remaining amount towards the various different elements associated with our transportation network, our roads, resurfacing, technology, sidewalks, Vision Zero, resurfacing, building the network. It didn't allow us to invest in stadiums or major expansion in terms of expanding the network. The citizens actually voted at 57%. It passed enormously. However, because of the previous gonna put it on the ballot, didn't put it on the ballot, and the lack of trust of the electeds to make good decisions or to change the game, there was an element of an oversight committee that had more power than the Supreme Court thought they should have. And subsequently, it was struck down. So we collected the money for about 2.25 years and generated about $500 million, a little more than $560 million. Is it about $560 million that's sitting around waiting for a Supreme Court decision. We now have a decision, and we're unable to spend those dollars. So all the planning we were getting ready to do, knowing and hoping and real excited about the fact that we were seeing good poll numbers showing that this was going to pass, all went out the window, and it's now 4 years old. We decided as a board of county commission that it would be important to honor the voters' wishes and bring it back. We're keeping the allocations relatively close to the previous formula that was based on our long-range transportation plan, and has the ability to adjust based on goals, objectives, and performance measures associated with what the TPO actually establishes as our metrics. So we're bringing it back to voters. It's the same percentage. It's basically within 0.5% of the previous allocation of the plan. It still has an oversight committee to give the citizens guidance and opportunity to give us guidance without necessarily having the power to take it away from the Board of County Commission in terms of making the decision, which is the element of why it was struck down. And we need to bring it back to the voters. The challenge we have is a very different economic environment. And so we've got to get out there and make sure that voters understand this is what you voted for. This isn't on top of what you voted for back in 18. And this is what it'll pay for. And this is why it makes sense for us to invest in this way. The other challenge is last year there was some legislation that was passed, and all of you that are thinking about referendums or putting a referendum on the ballot, specifically in the area of transportation, need to be very aware of this piece of legislation that was passed last year. But it limits what a municipality or a government that's issuing a referendum and putting something on the ballot in terms of the way in which they communicate to voters what the ballot means, what it is, and what it says. There is no more opportunity to advocate on behalf of your own, well-being for your county and your residents. You have to actually just speak to the education element. So you can educate the voters on what's on the ballot, period. Which creates a bit of a problem, because if it means you just have to give a project list for a 30-year referendum, that's kind of hard to do, because we know that transportation plans change. But we're working very hard to try and make sure that we develop a good strategy for helping our voters understand that this is not what they voted on before. We haven't been able to spend the money prior, although there was, on the back of the budget ballot, a proviso that did allow for the monies that were collected to be, after a judge ordered it, to go to the Department of Revenue to consider a plan on how Hillsborough could spend the money for our transportation. So we're keeping our fingers crossed, but timing matters. That plan will be submitted in September, where suddenly people are going to hear that maybe we might have $500 million to spend right before we're asking voters to tax themselves in a very difficult economy. So while it might seem like a no-brainer when 57% of the voters voted for it before, it's not. How you communicate what you are going to spend the dollars on, why it's important, and what opportunities it creates to address both the opportunities and the stressors in a community is critically important in order to help us achieve an opportunity to serve our residents when they need to get around. So we are wrestling with that every day, and it's live and well. So I just wanted to make sure that it doesn't always seem as simple as it seems, but then you find yourself suddenly with this opportunity to make a big difference, but then there still can be barriers of success that you have to overcome. So.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I would like to invite Commissioner Stone to talk about her experiences in Marion County.
Thank you. And thank you for the invitation to share Marion County's story here. It really starts back in 2008. I was not on the board at that time, but I was living in Marion County, and I saw the recession and how it impacted Marion County. Our largest employer base was construction, and property values fell 38% in 2008, and we were sorely behind as the years progressed with the purchase of capital improvements and road projects. So to help keep as much construction going as possible during that time, we nearly nixed all of our impact fees. And as you, as elected officials, know, once you lower a fee, it's very difficult to get it back again or even start to increase it, and especially when you're dealing with a large group of builders and realtors. But the commission knew in 2015 that we must find a way to address our needs, and through a lot of community meetings and conversations, the best way to raise those revenues was evaluated whether we increased the impact fee or if we looked at the 1 cent sales tax. That was discussed, and we were successful with getting large groups of stakeholders to support the sales tax option, and then this gave the builders also time to continue to recover from the 2008 downturn. Plus, it also allows 30% of what we collect today to come in through visitors who are passing through Marion County or spending some time with us. I was elected first in 2016. One of the greatest supporters, even back in the 2015-2016 when this began being discussed, was our Chamber and Economic Development organization. And our Chamber and our Economic Development is actually one organization that had merged together during that downturn time. So those two groups now being one, known as Marion County CEP, the Chamber and Economic Partnership, they took on the task of polling our citizens to determine what would be supported and for how long the sales tax should be implemented. And as you heard, this is not a 1 cent sales tax simply for transportation. It also funds public safety as well. So through that polling, the public told us that public safety needed to be addressed just as much as roadways. The CEP then took on the task to help educate the public by visiting large voter block community meetings, and they launched a really great mail campaign as outreach to influence our voters. And because our public safety, fire rescue, and sheriff departments were benefiting, they too helped educate the public and supported the mailers with their pictures. Roads aren't pretty, as you could imagine, but yet when you get a mailer with a firefighter or an ambulance, things of public safety needs, it's going to get a little bit more attention, at least in our community. Therefore, the referendum that we used did have the split for public safety to be a 60-40, 60% for transportation, 40% for public safety. The voters supported it at 55% in 2016. The timeline was simply for 4 years. And whenever the polling took place again, as we considered it for 2020, we polled to determine whether or not we could extend that 4-year timeline, whether more maybe could go to transportation, but because of the needs that we still had with public safety, it was best that we leave it alone and let it run the referendum exactly as it was previously. This time it passed over 70%, so we do have it for 2024. And again, we're very happy for this. We hope that what we've put into place is going to continue to give us that transparency and that trust that possibly when we look at it again, we may get to extend that. But Marion County has a population of just over 370,000 people. We have 1,600 plus miles of roadways to maintain. We don't have a transportation millage. We rely on the gas taxes, and we use MSTUs in our neighborhoods whenever we're doing anything with those roadways. So our main source of funds is what I've just shared, in addition now to that sales tax. We're the 5th largest county in the state by way of land mass. We have 3 interchanges on I-75 that's in our urban growth boundary area. We also have a north and a south interchange that are in our rural areas. And both of those, north and south, have truck stops that are utilized extensively but they need work. They haven't been touched since the 1960s when they were first originally put in place. There is going to be some additional work coming to our south end, and we expect some in the north, hopefully, but nothing is formalized or funded or being discussed at this moment. But we are seeing a lot of truck traffic. During the time since 2008, we've also approved 3 industrial parks and distribution commerce centers, with the 4th one that was just recently approved this year on the north end of our county. We have received funding for an additional interchange on I-75 as well, due to these commerce parks that have been coming online with Marion County. That new interchange is due to be built and construction begun in 2025. The interchange would not have been possible, we don't believe, without the county's contribution of over $20 million to that interchange as well. The power of the penny sales tax for us in 2016, when it first began, was just over $4 million. 2017, nearly $21 million. 2018, over $30 million. 2019, nearly $42 million. And in 2020, just over $70 million. So that's a lot of money for Marion County, and nearly 70 miles of new and rehabilitated roadways have been paid for with our portion of the sales tax that's been collected thus far.
Thank you, Commissioner Stone. Paul, would you like to share your experiences in Broward County? I know the transportation sales surtax over there passed in 2018.
Yes, it did, but I'd like to start off in 2016 when it failed. So in 2016, we actually put a very interesting combination on the ballot. And to give you guys a little background on Broward County, we are South Florida. Fort Lauderdale is our major city. Major seaport, major airport. We are smack dab between Palm Beach and Miami-Dade. So if you're driving to Miami, you have to go through Broward. Okay, at the time, population about 1.7 million in a region of 6.5 million, and borders don't matter. About 25% of our population comes and goes between county borders, work, live, play, et cetera. So very fluid population. So as we're going through, we're looking at our need, and also Broward's built out. We don't have any more land to build new roads. If we want to build new roads, we have to knock down houses. And then who's going to live there to drive on the new roads that we're building? It's a very poor cycle. So, additionally, we don't have a central business district. Pretty much all of our housing and commerce are spread out like peanut butter. There's not one city center. It's not like a Detroit or Chicago where there's one central area. Everybody goes everywhere. So we definitely identified a need. Now we're talking about the transportation surtax, and if you haven't read it, I really recommend it. It might put you to sleep, but it's very informational. The state of Florida puts out the Local Governmental Financial Handbook, which has all the information you need, gives estimates. At the time, we were looking that a 1-cent sales tax in Broward would generate roughly $300 million a year. And this was in 2015, 2016. And when we're looking at the transportation surtax, the best summary I can give you is that anything rubber touches, it can build. Whether those are rubber tires, rubber wheels, rubber shoes, that transportation surtax can improve that infrastructure. Well, combining that with the municipal needs, there's also the infrastructure surtax, which can build different things and have different effects. You can use that infrastructure sales tax for police stations and police vehicles, flooding, all the things that your public works budgets, those tough decisions you have to make, can be positively affected by that infrastructure surtax. So after many meetings, many discussions, many spreadsheets, acres of spreadsheets, they came up with a compromise. So in 2016, yes, the transportation surtax was put on the ballot at a 0.5 cent. Additionally, there was a half-cent infrastructure sales tax. And these were paired in a way so that both had to pass in order to win. If just the transportation surtax passed, which happened, but the infrastructure didn't, which happened, both died. And the reason for this was that everybody would get something they need. Personally, I thought it was a good plan. It gave funding to the cities, gave funding to the county. We were able to, you can build the infrastructure both for the roadway and then your public works. Cities have different needs. We have some cities whose sewer's still on septic. Okay. Also Broward, we have some cities that are established in 1910, some that established 1991. So they all had very different needs of how to use the funding. I think at the end of the day, it became very confusing for the voter because you're not selling one concept of transportation, you're selling the one concept of transportation plus the needs of 31 municipalities. So it's 32 different ideas to the voter base. And like I said, it didn't pass. Then a year later, the county made the decision to put the transportation surtax at 1 cent. And that's also a big decision that you'd have to make. You can do these in half-cent increments. I'll be honest with you, it's the same amount of effort, the same amount of education, whether it's a half-cent or 1 cent. So if it's the same effort, you may as well go for the full penny. And then in 2018, the full penny passed. And since then, I think so in 2016, we were looking at $300 million a year in estimates. 2 years later in 2018, it was up to about 3.25. The most recent estimate for 2022 puts it at $425 million a year based on the sales tax. And now the county is doing a lot of work of the planning, what can we do, all the big shiny projects that we thought were unachievable now have a goal line. So thank you.
Robert, would you like to share your experiences working in different parts of the country?
Sure. I'll talk about three things. I'll talk about potential sources in addition to sales tax. I'll talk about how we choose the best tax in each situation, and then talk about how to achieve success in getting the new sources implemented. Regarding potential sources, I'll draw from actually current experience, projects we're working on right now or quite recently across a broad range of contexts, from a 25-bus transit system in Flagstaff, Arizona, to all transportation in the Chicago region, both highway and transit, to a 30-mile commuter rail extension in New Hampshire, extending commuter rail from close to Boston. And thinking about the potential sources, and we considered most of these in those three projects. And here I'll sort of caution, saying I'm trained as an engineer, but I'm going to try to sound like an economist here. What are the things that we can apply a tax or a fee to? Well, we can certainly apply a tax to consumption. That's what a sales tax is. It can be either a broad-based sales tax, or it can be a relatively narrow tax. So in Austin, Texas, for example, recently, one of the choices that we considered was the so-called sin tax, looking at a special tax on alcohol and tobacco products. You know, that's an example. In Flagstaff, Arizona, we're looking at a sale on recreational use of marijuana, for example, as a potential transportation source. By the way, these are ideas. I'm not recommending any particular one of them. We can do a tax on use or the delivery of mobility. So, you know, the current state gallonage tax on motor fuels. A vehicle miles traveled tax, which addresses the transition from internal combustion engines to electric battery buses. Tolls, transit fares, a tax on commercial off-street parking, a tax on rental cars, a tax on transportation network providers like Uber and Lyft. City of Chicago does that, for example. Vehicle registration fees, typically applied at the state level, but could be applied at the local level. It's being used for that purpose by Go Triangle in North Carolina. We can tax wealth in terms of taxing the assessed value on real property, for example, commonly used by municipal governments, and sometimes that's used for supporting transportation investments, or an ad valorem tax for vehicle registration. Some states apply the vehicle registration fee rather than per vehicle by vehicle type. Instead, it's on the market value of the vehicle, recognizing the age of the vehicle. We can't do it in Florida, but we could tax income, and it's certainly a tax that's broadly applied by states for general government purposes, and some of that is applied for transportation. But we're not going to talk about that in this state. We could do a tax on accessibility, typically associated with real property. So we can have a general property tax, we can have a benefit assessment district where a new tax is imposed within a certain distance of a defined area, or we can apply tax increment financing, which is no new tax rate, but just taxing the increased development that results from a transportation investment. And outside the U.S., a very common source that's applied at both the national level and the state level is a value-added tax, which applies a tax essentially in each point in the production of an item or in the delivery of services. So there's a broad range of alternatives. And how you decide, it really gets to my second point, which is the evaluation measures. There's a lot of temptation to study this issue. I don't think it's necessary to restudy the issue of how to evaluate these sources. This was done very well by two congressional commissions more than 10 years ago. The National Surface Transportation Policy and Revenue Study Commission delivered a report in 2009 that addressed considerations like, does it generate enough revenue, stability and predictability, responsiveness to inflation, flexibility, appropriateness for use in a dedicated context, compliance costs, administration costs, equity, relationship to economic efficiency, the incidence of the tax in terms of how it's applied, evasion potential, and ease of implementation. Very common set of sources. I would reduce them down to four major factors. Does it generate the revenue that you need, so yield? Are there legal barriers in terms of state constitution or legislation barriers? What's the administrative burden or ease to implement? So, for example, a sales tax is very easy to implement because you're already, in most cases, already collecting a sales tax. And then finally, equity. So sales tax for transportation, particularly for public transportation purposes, is the most commonly applied source of funding nationwide. But it has significant equity considerations. I've testified 3 times before the Miami-Dade Board of Commissioners on this point. And they certainly recognized it, but they also realize it's an easy tax to implement because the mechanism is already in place. Finally, I want to talk briefly about achieving success. If you're not already familiar with it, there's an organization called the Center for Transportation Excellence. It's at cfte.org. They are funded by the American Public Transit Association, and it's effectively acting as an advocacy group, defending the merits of, in this case, public transportation, but also providing local leaders with what they need to know to get taxes implemented. So they have a really comprehensive database going back to 2012. There were 403 referendum issues in the U.S. since then. 3/4 of them passed. All right. Most dedicated transportation source referenda eventually do pass. And on their website, you'll see a lot of the reasons why they pass. And I encourage everybody here to look that up, cfte.org. All right, I'll stop at that point.
Thank you. I know we are sort of running short on time, but still, I will basically have one question for each of our panel members. The first question I have is for Chair Kimberly Overman. We know the Hillsborough County voters will be voting on a 1% sales surtax for transportation in November. How's your community building a coalition of various interest groups and ensuring that various stakeholders are getting involved as part of the process?
That's a very good question, because we're still trying to figure that out. Just largely because we discovered this piece of legislation that sort of changed the way you advocate on behalf of your own constituencies to help them understand why this is important to vote for it. But I failed to mention how our communities are similar or different. Hillsborough County is 1,000 square miles. And it has about 1.5, and I would suggest, given how fast we've grown in the last year, getting close to 1.6 million people. About 4 to 5, I'd say 500,000 are actually in the city of Tampa, in a very dense urban area relatively. But then there's a ring around that of more exurban type of area, and then we have our rural areas, very rural areas, hugely different from one corner of the county to another. And of course, we're sitting with a bay in the middle of it that help us partner with Pasco and Pinellas for a large percentage of the workforce in our region actually come into Hillsborough County for the workforce. So we don't have just a lot of people moving around in the county. We have a lot of people who don't live in the county coming into the county every day. And so that has created a different dynamic with our voters. They recognize, we've got to figure out how to be able to get around when we've got all these other people showing up during rush hour. And it is an interesting conversation. But it does become more important when we're limited to education only, that we develop a strong relationship with our partners, because they don't have the limitations that the governments have. Electeds can basically advocate on behalf of it because we're putting it forward as electeds. The county has to develop its own communications plan. But we all know that our relationship as elected officials is dynamic. We deal with our chambers, we deal with our neighborhood associations, we deal with our advocacy groups, we deal with our medical facilities, we deal with our education facilities, we deal with all of these, we have relationships with all of these entities. And I would suggest to you that it really is important where they have the flexibility of telling you why it's important to vote for something like this, why it's important to have the resources to invest in a community because of the ROI, or because of the return on investment, about why investing in transit actually is a way of addressing equity. When I heard you say equity and sales tax, and you have to address equity, when an average family spends $400 in sales tax on that penny, but it saves them $10,000 a year annually that they have to spend on a car when they have another alternative, what's the better number in a difficult economy? But you have to be able to say that. But is that a fact? Or that educates, or is it advocacy? So having your partners can be able to make those cases is critically important, in my opinion. And one of the reasons why the citizens' referendum had no problem passing is because that's who was advocating on behalf of it. So that partnership is critically important.
Thank you. Commissioner Stone, you mentioned that the Transportation Surtax referendum has been quite successful. So again, the first surtax referendum was voted on in 2016, so it has been 6 years now. So how does the county ensure the process is transparent and accountable in implementation and also in planning?
Well, that's a great question, because we believe that the transparency may allow us to possibly go past the 4 years should we ask the voters to approve it again. by proving that we are very accountable with the dollars that's being collected. Those projects that are approved first are, they come through the budget process every single year with many public hearings and public meetings that the citizens are able to participate in. And then we have a website that also tracks everything that is happening with those dollars, whether it be the public safety for fire rescue or the sheriff's office, and then all of our road projects as well. So if you hit on our Marion County website, you then can go directly to that particular page and learn more and see every single project and every single item that has been bought with those dollars, and we utilize the procurement process as well. So again, it is very, very transparent to the voters.
Yes, Commissioner Stone, you do have a very good website, so I was able to get all the information online. So Paul, I have the question which I have for Broward County. So when I was researching my the Broward County tax referendum, again, as we know, in Broward County, the surtax referendum was defeated in 2016, 2006, and in 1990. So what's changed in 2018? So what clicked in 2018?
I don't know. And I'm going to be 100% honest with you. If you look at the playbook of how to pass a surtax referendum, everything in 2018 was the opposite. I'm not quite sure why it passed. I think the 2016 gave everybody a taste of it.
Yes.
But effectively it ran in the campaign of, we're going to make transportation better. And that was it. And it passed.
Oh, thank you. And maybe because the population is increasing at such a exponential rate, people do understand the value of basically spending on transportation network.
The standard playbook for this is develop a plan, have a very clear message as to what's going to be accomplished over what time period, what the improvements are going to be, what the benefits of those improvements are going to be, who they're going to benefit, and set your path forward and tell the public this is what you're voting on. And in 2018, that didn't happen. It was really just, we need 1 cent for transportation, and it passed.
So you need to have
it's an anomaly across the
Yes.
country. It's not the first time South Florida's had an anomaly. I mean, it might have worked because at the same time, Miami-Dade's been going through, and you can speak to this, has been going through a lot of pain as far as they overpromised. They had $0.015 worth of transportation projects, but only a half penny to fund them all. So they broke 2 out of 3 of their promises right off the bat. And maybe that's why it worked, but I wish I had a better explanation for you. I mean, sometimes just right place, right time.
Right place, right time. The stars align. The stars align. No, thank you. So Robert, again, you have worked in different parts of the country. What lessons do you have for Florida communities?
Well, I think about the successes, which, by the way, were largely sales taxes. We did the financial plan, a 1% sales tax in Dallas for their light rail system. Did that in 1983, and in 85, a sales tax in Corpus Christi, Texas, a 0.5% tax, and then a property tax in Savannah, Georgia, that created the county authority there. Being very open with the public. I mean, nothing was hidden. It was a very transparent process, very, very clear understanding of what level of service was going to be delivered and what the implications were, well-documented process. Again, what the Center for Transportation Excellence talks about in their lessons learned certainly point to these topics, but also, just generally getting out there and hearing, listening, hearing what the public has to say and what their needs are, and making sure your plan is addressing those needs.
Thank you. We do have some other questions, but I know we are sort of short on time, and I do see some people are leaving. So Do we have any other questions from the audience? So again, we can take a couple of questions from the members who are here. Yes, sir.
I serve with Commissioner Overman on the Hillsborough County Commission, and one of our challenges with having it on the ballot this year, of course, is the economic climate right now, the inflation and the gas prices. And I wonder the comment about not knowing what caused it to really make it over the finish line in Broward. I wonder if there's a point at which there's just people recognize that it's so critical, that it's gotten so out of control, where they really just will vote for it for that reason alone. And then the second, I want to ask you about that. And then the second thing is, well, let me ask you that. I mean, is that maybe the reason that it passed, that it was just got to the point where things were so congested, people just knew viscerally that they needed to do something?
I mean, that's definitely one of our working theories. Like I said, Broward's pretty spread out, a lot of single vehicle occupancy, and we promised a better bus and transit system. I think a lot of it was, okay, so you're gonna get them off the road. I still get my car, but they get off the road. And so maybe that happened. If you do a deeper dive into who voted yes for it, it was more of your lower income communities that did vote yes. So the ones that I guess we're going to see more benefit from it.
And let me just ask you just one other part of the question. Do you think it makes sense to make the case to people that tourists and non-county residents will pay part of the tax? Did you make that?
Yes, we did. So we had several educational talking points, one of which was how many tourists are going to be contributing to this. We have the second largest tourist destination in the state behind the Mouse, which is Sawgrass Mills Mall. Just single buildings.
We're next.
So,
We're next. Yeah.
So we have Sawgrass Mills Mall, which we use as an example of that. And then also kind of getting to the nitty gritty of this is that extra 1 cent is only taxed on the first $5,000 of what you spend. So when you go and buy a new car, you're only paying an additional $50. And kind of just delineating that. And then also making the point of the things you don't pay tax on will not see a new tax. So your groceries, your prescriptions are not going to see that. And I think part of it is in 2016, we did do a very good job of educating on those factors, and it's still carried through to 2018.
Good point. Really good point.
Do we have any other question? So if not, but anyway, we have the contact information on the screen. So you can always email us, call us, and again, thank you. And that's sort of the end of this panel discussion, and maybe we can wrap this up in our regular spots.